Hallo, guten Morgen, lieber Fourth Years. Und hier ist unsere Arbeit für heute. Here's our work for today and there is our title for today, Damals und heute. Now I hope that you all know what the word heute means because we have seen that before. It does of course mean today and today is Freitag, den 24. April. But the word damals may be new. This word damals means literally at that time, back then. So if you're comparing something how it used to be back then to something today, damals und heute, at that time and today. And that's what we're looking at today, heute, comparing things how they used to be and how things are now. So, a few phrases for you first of all. Als ich ein Kind war, mit 10 Jahren. Früher, als Kind, and there is that word again, damals. These are all phrases you can use to describe how things were previously. So what do they mean? Als ich ein Kind war, that means when I was a child, when I was a kid, if you like, when I was a child. Mit 10 Jahren. Now we know mit means with. 10 means 10. Jahren, years. So with 10 years, literally, but we would say in English, at the age of 10. Basically, when I was 10. At the age of 10, I did this. Mit 10 Jahren. Früher means earlier, previously, before. So previously, I used to do this. Als Kind, the next one down, there it is obviously this word kind again, just means as a child. Here is when I was a child. This is just as a child. Als Kind, as a child. What I used to do as a child. And damals, as we said, is at that time. I used to do things. So after those phrases, we could add other things to form a sentence. What would be the first word of each of these next remaining phrases going to be? It will, of course, be a verb, because these will all take up the first idea of the sentence. So we could have habe ich Karten gespielt, or habe ich Chips gegessen, or habe ich oft Musik gehört, or war ich sehr laut, or hatte ich viele Freunde. Hopefully you've recognized that all of these 5 sentences are in the past tense. The top 3 in the perfect tense, these 2 just using the imperfect tense of haben and sein. But they're all in the past tense, saying what you used to do when you were younger, previously, earlier, in the olden days. And as you can see, the verb is starting each of these phrases, because if I combine these together as one full sentence, this, whatever's in this box, would take the first idea, the verb then have to be the second idea, and then the ich would come next. So you could use any of these with any of these, but if we just took them along the lines as they are, als ich ein Kind war, habe ich Karten gespielt. When I was a child, I played cards. Mit 10 Jahren habe ich Chips gegessen. At the age of 10, I ate crisps, of course, not chips. Früher habe ich oft Musik gehört. Earlier, previously, I used to listen to music, and I've actually included there an oft. I often listened to music. Als Kind war ich sehr laut. As a child, I was very loud. Yes. And damals hatte ich viele Freunde. Back then, at that time, in those days, I had lots of friends. Aber heute habe ich keine Freunde. Now, the next thing we're going to look at today are modal verbs. Now, we have seen modal verbs before, and I hope you might be able to remember what modal verbs are and some of the modal verbs we've seen. There are, in fact, a total of only 6 modal verbs in the German language. We are, however, only going to focus on 4 of them today. We don't need to necessarily look at all 6. And as I say, we have seen most, if not all, of these before, and the 4 we're going to look at are müssen, können, dürfen, and wollen. A quick reminder what they mean. Hopefully you can remember these. Müssen means to have to. Können means to be able to. Dürfen means to be allowed to. And wollen means to want to. And how do these verbs look in the present tense? They look like this. In the ich forms, the du forms, the er, sie, es or man forms, those are the singular versions. You'll notice there are patterns in that none of the ich forms for these verbs end in the letter E, which is what we'd normally expect. None of the er, sie, es or man forms end in the letter T, which is what we'd normally expect. But the do forms do end in st, as we would normally expect. And also the ich and the er, sie, es forms are the same as each other, so that is maybe helpful. But also these first three that have an umlaut in the infinitive, the umlaut has disappeared. But also for these three verbs, können, dürfen and wollen, the vowel has even changed from an O to an I, a U umlaut to an A, an O umlaut to an A. But what do they look like in the plural forms? We have the wir forms, the ihr forms, the sie forms meaning they, and the sie with a capital S meaning you, the polite form of you. And here you can see the forms here are very similar to each other in the plural forms, and they've actually gone back to the forms that we had in the infinitive. So these umlauts have reappeared, and the vowels have gone back to what they were in the infinitive form. So those are quite straightforward. So just to take this one as an example, we've got I must or I have to, you have to, he or she has to or he or she must, we must or we have to, you have to in the plural, they have to, and you in the plural have to. I think you may have already these, most or all of these written down in your exercise books in the back section, in your grammar section at the back, possibly already. If you haven't, you may want to make a note of them. And these are, remember, the present tense forms of these verbs. And the reason why I stress the present tense, because we're going to look at how we can use these verbs in the past tense. And whereas in our example sentences just before we looked at some perfect tense sentences, I also mentioned very briefly the imperfect. Generally speaking, when we use modal verbs, we use the imperfect tense when we want to put them into the past. So, what do they look like in the imperfect tense in the past? There we go. Well, they look like this. So here are our four verbs again, müssen, können, dürfen and wollen in the infinitive forms. And in the ich form of the imperfect tense, they look like that, and the do forms and the er, sie, es forms. Now just leave it with the singulars for now. You can see what's happened here. The letter T is appearing in all of these forms. All of them have a letter T towards the end. Now the ich forms do end in E, they actually end in te for all of them, as do the er, sie, es, man forms. So again, the ich forms and the er, sie, es forms are still the same as each other, but they just end in te now. And even though there is a T that has appeared in the do forms, they still end in est, st. So the plural forms look like this. And what you can see here is, again, the endings are still the same, the en, the t, the en, the en, but they've also got this additional t, mussten, konnten, durften, wollten. What has also happened here is that for these three verbs with an umlaut in their infinitive, the umlaut has gone. So there's no umlaut anywhere in the imperfect tense for these verbs. But also you'll notice that for these three where in the present tense the vowel changed, that hasn't happened. The vowel has stayed the same, but there is no umlaut. So these are the forms for the imperfect tense. That means if I took this one again, this ich musste means I had to. I had to do something. It's a past tense. Du musstest. You had to. Er, sie, es musste. He or she or it or one had to. Wir mussten. We had to. Ihr musstet. You had to. Plural. More than one person. Sie mussten. They had to with a small s. And sie mussten with a capital S. You had to in the polite form. Here this would be I was able to. I was allowed to. I wanted to. She wanted to. He wanted to. We wanted to. So again, it may be worth making a note of these in the back of your exercise book, but make sure you have got them clearly labelled as the imperfect tense, the past tense form of these modal verbs, which is different from the present tense form. But I have some examples as well for you, which you might also wish to make a note of. So here is our first example. Wir mussten Hausaufgaben machen. What does that mean in English? It means we had to do homework. Yeah, it was past tense. We had to do it. Last week, It was the holidays. It wasn't fair. We had to do some homework. And this week, we've got to do some more, which is great. What about our second example? Durfte nicht in die Schule gehen. He was not allowed to go to school. Obviously, for us, that's still the case now. But if we're talking about 2 weeks ago, was he allowed to go to school? No, he wasn't. He was not allowed to go to school. Durfte nicht in die Schule gehen. And notice even here, how exciting is this? I've even included in this example an in with which case? It's the accusative case, of course, because it's saying into the school. It's in plus movement. How exciting is that? That's really exciting. Durfte nicht in die Schule gehen. He was not allowed to go to school. A third example. Shall we see it? Here it is. Ich wollte meine Tante besuchen. What does that mean in English? Ich wollte meine Tante besuchen. I wanted to visit my aunt. I wanted to visit my aunt. Don't forget, just as we would in the present tense for these modal verbs, we very often see them with an infinitive at the end of the sentence to complete. We had to do. He was not allowed to go. I wanted to visit, and so on. One more example then. Wir mussten nicht auf Deutsch schreiben. And what does that mean in English? It means we did not have to write in German. Remember, with müssen, it means to have to. You put it into the negative, we don't have to, which isn't the same as we must not. It's something different. But in the imperfect tense, we didn't have to write in German. We didn't have to write in German. So you might want to make a note of those examples as well to show you the imperfect tense of these modal verbs in action. And one more thing to look at before the presentation here is finished. And that is what I am calling some combined tense examples. So using modal verbs in the imperfect tense, but also in the present tense in the same sentence. How amazing is that? Here's an example. Früher durfte ich Shorts tragen, aber jetzt muss ich eine Krawatte tragen. So here, at the beginning part of the sentence, I have got my past tense. There it is, my imperfect tense. Earlier, previously, in the olden days, I was allowed to wear shorts. But now, present tense, I have to wear a tie. So previously, I was allowed to wear shorts, but now I have to wear a tie, is what that one means. And one more example. Als ich ein Kind war, musste ich mit dem Bus fahren, aber jetzt darf ich Auto fahren. So, I've actually got 3 clauses here, and I've separated them all out with commas, as appropriately. So, als ich ein Kind war, when I was a child, I, past tense, musste, I had to go by bus. I had to go by bus. Aber jetzt, but now, I am allowed to drive a car. Darf ich Auto fahren, to drive a car, rather than just to travel by car. I'm allowed to drive a car. If I want to say just go by car, mit dem Auto fahren. So, als ich ein Kind war, musste ich mit dem Bus fahren, aber jetzt darf ich Auto fahren. So that is a really good example. There are 2 really good examples of getting some longer sentences comparing a past tense modal verb and a present tense modal verb even to compare how things used to be when you were younger and how they are now. And that is the basis of today's work. Now, the tasks, once again, you will find all on Firefly. But if I just bring up the book for you, I will show you that it is tasks from page 58 that you are required to do today. You've got a reminder here of what we've just been talking about with the modal verbs. Here they are in the present tense. Here's an example 1 in the imperfect tense in the past, with another couple of examples which may look a bit familiar. But of course, also do look at the PowerPoint presentation at the beginning of this video to help guide you through these different forms of these modal verbs and to make some notes on those as well. Okay, we'll catch up towards the end of the lesson on Teams to see how you did. But I hope it all works out well for you. Also viel Glück und viel Spaß. Bis später.